Hi everyone, it's Martin here from Robson Nadler. Just a quick update on the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. We were lucky enough last week to be approached to submit some of our clients to run pilot claims. Of those we submitted, 2 of those were selected, and we've gone through those claims this morning. And to cut to the chase, one of them went very well, the other hasn't gone so well. I'll tell you as much as we're allowed to now. So what I mean by as much as we're allowed to is we're not actually allowed to share any screen grabs, obviously these sessions have been recorded, we know exactly how they work, we know exactly what questions are asked, but we've been asked not to share any of that information. What I can tell you though is the process is in itself very straightforward. At the moment, the pilot works by doing the eligibility checker, which I've talked about previously. At the end, you're asked to make sure you've got a government gateway ID. You log in, and now for these pilot people, when they log in, they're taken straight to the claim screen. The claim screen really couldn't be easier. It asks for very little information, and anything it does ask for you should have immediately to hand. Your UTR, national insurance number, that type of thing, and of course a bank account. And the key thing is it also gives you the figure and shows you how they've calculated their figure. I'll come on to that more later. Just a couple of things to mention here. One person, we had a bit of an issue logging in on the government gateway ID because the government gateway ID they were using was the partnership gateway. I should stress here, you must have a personal government gateway ID to claim. It doesn't matter what entity you are, if you're claiming this, it's a personal claim. So even if you're a partnership, you're personally claiming for your loss of the share of that income. So you make sure you've got the right government gateway ID. Now that added a bit of time onto our claim this morning on the pilot claim, but in fairness, we just clicked registered for gateway ID, and that in itself took about 5 minutes. It was very straightforward. Nothing like the olden days when you had to wait 14 days for codes through the post, and very laborious process. So it really didn't take long. There was a couple of options to do it using a series of questions from your credit file. Things like when was the last time you opened a bank account, when was the last time you took out a new credit card. All very nice and easy to answer for most people. Or there was an option to click and verify via the passport office. So again, if you've got an up-to-date passport, I presume they are comfortable that they've checked your ID when issuing the passport. They're just going to match the files together and continue from there. So very straightforward. The next thing on the business bank account or personal account, it just says where do you want the money paid, business or personal. Of course you can do what you want, but it's worth remembering that this is taxable income within your business, but certainly taxable turnover. So it would seem to make sense to pay it into the business account. Obviously if you then need to use that money in other ways, send it where you need after that. But in the first instance, I would recommend, just from an accountancy perspective, and to keep it nice and clean, you pay it into the business account and you make sure your records show what it is. So nice and simple. It's worth just covering a couple of other things as well before we get on to the figures. You do have to confirm that your business has been adversely affected by coronavirus. So first of all, I would argue that if your turnover is higher now than it was this time last year, you probably can't make that argument, so shouldn't be claiming. It doesn't ask for turnover figures, it doesn't ask for anything other than verification that your business has been adversely affected. Now, when I say if your turnover is higher, what I mean is if you work 20 days a month on average, and you have still been working 20 days a month on average for the same or higher rates, you're really going to struggle to argue that your business has been affected. If it turns out your turnover is higher now than it was last year, but it would have been even higher had it not been for COVID, then fine, make the claim. But just beware, it's not just a simple case of if you're self-employed you get money, it's that you have to have been affected. Now on to the figures. As I say, we've done 2. The first one was textbook. It was exactly the way it was intended. This is a person who's been a partner in a partnership for a number of years. It is their main source of income. So when you log in, it presents you with a figure. You click the little drop down and it shows you how they've worked out that figure. This person had 3 years worth of figures in there. We averaged them out. It was the figure that the revenue had calculated, very straightforward, and it was 3 years figures, basically multiplied out to get 3 months worth of average profit at 80%. Nice and simple. Click the box to confirm, put your bank details in, and it says don't chase us for 6 days. The suggestion is therefore that you'll get the money within 6 days, which would make sense. That's the same as the furlough claim for employers. And I presume that's just for HMRC to do some basic checking on things like which bank account it's going to make sure people aren't fraudulently claiming on behalf of others. The second client we did is slightly more complex, and it's basically exactly the issue that I raised as a potential problem in, I think, my last video. This is a person who began self-employment late on in the tax year 17-18. They then had a good, very profitable year in 18-19. When we've gone in to make the claim, the figure that has been presented as the averaged profits is basically half of the 18-19 profit. Now, I'll make figures up. These are not the actual figures, but there was a very small loss in the 17-18 year, and let's just say there was 30 grand's worth of profits in the 18-19 year. Now, the way the guidance suggests this would work is that for 17 and 18 we would ignore that year because it wasn't the main source of income. It wasn't. This person had an employment and income which far dwarfed the loss, obviously. So you would expect them to say, well, we've got 1 year's worth of profit. That is therefore the average year of profit. We'll work out 3 months worth and give you 80% of that. And that'll work out about 6 grand or whatever, using a 30 grand starting point. It would be 6 grand, yeah. 7.5 would be 3 months. 80% of that would be 6 grand. What they've actually done though is said your average trading income is £15,000, so we're going to pay you out based on that. And of course the figure is therefore halved. Now, unfortunately, within the pilot, although there is a button to say ask for a review, the button doesn't work. So we're going through the normal pilot channels on this one. Meanwhile, the advice from the revenue is claim if it's smaller than you think it should be, make the claim, get what you can within the 6 days, and of course you then submit the review request. We don't know how long the review requests are going to take. They could take days, they could take weeks. If there's enough of them being made, it could take months. So all in all, it seems like HMRC have probably cracked this for what I would imagine would be a very large percentage of self-employed people. What I mean by that is most people will not have complex affairs. Most people will hopefully have been self-employed for more than 3 years. Or, ironically, in the example we have here, had they been self-employed for more of that year, then it would be right to include that middle year in the averaging. It just so happens on this occasion, it doesn't seem to tie in with the intention of the scheme. What we don't know yet is whether the review will be successful, because we're not sure, quite literally not sure, who is right here. We're not getting our hopes up on this one. We think the claim should be about double what is being offered. We're going to claim what's been offered and wait for the review, fingers crossed, and see what happens. As soon as we know any more on that, I will be updating you. Thank you.